So at the last meeting that we have, I mentioned that George Hepworth was kind of taking over the reins. I'm still going to be around, but taking over the reins with the Access Web Apps group, starting this month. And he's written several books. You'll see, obviously you can see his kind of summary of everything that he's done. But I'm working. I'm kind of letting go of the reins of this because I'm running an Office 365 Day conference in April here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and so that's eating up a lot of my time. And I'm going to be starting a Power Apps group, which actually starts tomorrow as well. So there's only so much I can volunteer for, and George graciously offered to help take on this, and there's several of us on the call here that I'm sure will present at future Access Web Apps meetings. So you'll get your share of stuff here. I noticed some new names in the participants listing, and I just want to ask: has everybody out there used Access Web Apps, or is anybody brand new to Access Web Apps?
Hi, this is Demita. I'm pretty fairly new to Access Web Apps.
Okay. Have you done anything? Have you created an app to begin with, or how far have you gotten?
No, actually, I'm interested in learning how to create the app. I've created a number of Access databases for both work and personal use, but I really want to expand my knowledge and skills, so I'm here.
Okay. That's awesome. That's great, and that's where most of us are coming from too. We've been developing an Access for decades. I know I started in 1994. And I'm a newbie compared to like George and Jack that started with version 1.0.
Actually, I started the same year you did, Andy.
You did, okay. But basically, the neat thing about Access Web Apps is you still use Access to design the interface, but everything runs inside of a browser window. So you don't have to force your end user to install Access or install Access runtime to be able to run the Access database. You can just invite them to the Access Web App. As long as they have a browser, they can run the app. And so as part of what George is doing, you'll see a good example of what he's done with an Access Web App, and he'll kind of show you a little bit of the differences between an Access Web App and an Access desktop. And I think you'll get a pretty good feel for it. The other thing I want to point out, if you've seen, and maybe George can pull up the Access User Groups website. Under the Access User Groups website is the Access Web Apps kind of subgroup. And within there's a whole section of videos. So if you're, basically it's the videos that we've recorded here over the last 2 or 3 years since we've been doing this. So there's some good videos on introducing it and the difference between Access Desktop and Access Web Apps and working with macros and a bunch of stuff like that. So I would encourage you to take a look at those videos as well.
Oh, fantastic!
So, great.
Thank you. I'll check it out.
Yeah, welcome to the group.
Thank you.
Glad to see you. Yeah. Okay. I think I got the user group. Oh dear, I have to go send you away. Okay. So since this is my initial experience as the kind of presenter coordinator here, I'm fumbling around a little bit more than I would like, but I think we've got things going here. I have I did pull up the Access User Group website. Is this what you're talking about, Andy?
And that's black on our side, so so right now it's covering your PowerPoint presentation.
I got to present it. Yeah, I have to present it first. Yeah, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, you have to share that.
I have to share that darn thing.
Hi, George. Don't worry. This is Lucy. I have already posted the link in the chat for the website where the recordings are.
Okay, so I won't worry about that so much. I'll just jump right into my presentation then. You can see where I've been down the road. My original book, Grover Park, Georgia on Access, was written with Access 2002. And every year I say, this year I'm going to update it, and every year I find other things to do. So one of my goals for this year is to really, really retire and finish that book, but we'll see how that goes. What I wanted to talk to you tonight about is one of the problems that makes working with Access web apps a bit more of a challenge than it needs to be. And Julian is on the call, and he's going to keep me honest, because Julian is in England, and he has a whole different set of problems to deal with. And what I'm going to talk about here really doesn't address...
Some of them relate to Access as well.
Yeah. And I say that by way of introducing the fact that my particular solution here really is only applicable to the time zones within the United States. And in order for it to work internationally, it would require a bit more work. But let's kind of jump in. Whenever we talk about Access web apps, we have to start with the assumption that you either have an Office 365 account in which you can create the Access web apps, or that you work in an organization which has a SharePoint site with Access web services enabled. And if you don't have either of those, then your first step is going to be to sign up for an Office 365 account. Does anybody not have that set up yet, or is that something you need to look at a little bit more? Okay, I'm going to assume that we're all there. Okay,
and if I'm just going to interrupt real quick. As part of the recording, in case anybody listens to this in the future, if anybody wants a trial of the Office 365 account, please let George or I know, because as a user group, we actually have free licenses that Microsoft has given us to allow people to use Office 365 well beyond the typical 30 or 90 days. So just let us know.
Okay, great. We'll make sure that you have some way to do it. And this is another initial step that I always recommend. Whenever you create a new Access web app, I always recommend you do it within a sub-site. I know by default they want to stick everything into the same high-level site, but I always recommend that for anything where you're especially if you're just testing it out, getting your feet wet, or you're ready to deploy it, it should be in a sub-site with its own unique permissions. And again, we're available for help if that becomes an issue for you. Okay, so the problem of time zone and daylight saving offsets in Access web apps. Office 365.
Hey,
George,
George, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. We're looking at the two screens where it's black on the left side, and then we're seeing the PowerPoint on the right. So I don't know if you can just share the one screen. All right, now we see Utter Access on the one and the PowerPoint on the right. There we go. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Are you good now?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to hop back in here and start at the beginning because I lost my train of thought there. So Office 365 is a very powerful, very broad, very comprehensive kind of development platform. And among the options you have there under your admin section is you can do site settings, including defining the regional settings for your location. So in this case, the one that I'm working with is set up for the Pacific time zone in the United States and Canada. And I don't know if that's large enough to see clearly, but the UTC offset for the Pacific time zone is 8 hours. So that means that whatever time it is here, it's 8 hours offset from the universal time zone. That only applies to the Office 365 SharePoint account. However, when you set up an Access web app, it creates its own SQL Azure database, and it is not necessarily in the same time zone as your Office 365 site. And I learned this the hard way. I was consulting with another Access developer in New York City, New York State, I guess. And the project that he asked me to help him with was he had built an Access desktop application to track pool staffing, swimming pools. And he had all the schedules, all the locations, all the work hours set up, but what they wanted was a way for their lifeguards, when they showed up at a swimming pool, to pull out their smartphone and log in that they had arrived for work, rather than having a kiosk or phone call or some other mechanism. They wanted to be able to do that directly on their phone. And obviously that's one of those cases where an Access web app works really well, because that's a very simple, compact, well-controlled, well-defined function. And it didn't require the entire database. It only required the ability to click a button saying, I'm here. Well, the first day he had people signing in, they were all signing in 3 hours late. And there was a bit of a hoo-ha-ha in the main office because everybody was showing up for work late. And as it turned out, that when he had set up his Office 365 account, the SQL Azure database, which was set up for him, was out here on the West Coast in a different time zone, 3 hours later, in fact. And in following through and trying to figure out what was going on, we discovered that exercise, I click the button that puts in the time that I start. That works great for me because I'm on the West Coast and my SQL Azure database behind this Access web app is also out here on the West Coast. So I get the right time. But Art was getting the 3 hour offset, and there was no way to change that. So we spent some time figuring out how to address this problem. In this case, the only function that we are really interested in for the Access web app is time-sensitive data entry, and that was the only one that didn't really work really well, as it turned out, because of this problem. As we worked through it, I realized that daylight savings is going to complicate the solution because some states do not observe daylight savings time. although most do. And the reason that is an issue is in thinking beyond just Art and myself, we started to think about, well, what happens if he has a client in Arizona and they want to run his pool staffing software? Arizona does not go on daylight savings time. So in addition to the offset problem, he has to account for daylight savings time as well. So that's kind of the problem that we ended up trying to resolve. And I'm going to hop into it now and see if I can show you a little bit about how it works. Okay, are you seeing the Access web app now correctly?
Nope.
No. All right.
Screen went black.
Screen went black. Okay, I got you. I thought I had shared this before. I still have to manually do it again, I guess. And now I've got enough. Did that work?
That does it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've also got enough programs up here that I'm getting some lag in the presentation. Okay, so this is the time zone application I built. The way this would work is there are tables behind it that handle all of the heavy lifting. In order to implement this in any one of your own Access web apps where this is an issue, you would have to basically import all of the tables that we created, as well as recreating the data macros that drive it. This by itself only serves as a demo in order to make it's a little bit different from what you might think of as kind of a standard Access application. You'd basically, it's not really an add-in. You just basically have to pull in all the objects and modify them to work. So now my mouse is just being really sluggish. Okay. As you can see, and I'm not even sure that I'm gonna, excuse me a second, I'm gonna, for some reason, I've lost my mouse, so I'll just have to kind of hope that I can find what I'm looking for. This is the splash screen. There's a table behind this one, which is the app table. It has an image field in it. It has the time zone offset, and as you can see, I originally said I'm in the Pacific time zone, which is the 8-hour offset from UTC. So you can see that right there. Yeah. Oh, that wasn't what I wanted to do. For whatever reason, this is really
Hello?
I apologize. I've lost my mouse control here. And what that's doing is
I'm seeing the mouse move a lot around.
yeah, you're seeing it, but I'm not. And again,
Lucy, do you have a suggestion for that?
Yeah. Is there a way that okay, now I've got it back, but I'm in a totally wrong location. Ah. I will get it back here momentarily. Okay. Yeah. And that, okay, that's not it either. There it is. Okay. Can you see it now? And I can see my mouse back. So are we back on track?
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay, apologize for that. Yeah, my mouse disappeared, and then randomly trying to get it back, I got way off track. Anyway, so if we edit the Access web app, you can see that the first step you would go through is to define the basic time zone offset from where the SQL Azure database resides for this app, because all of the other calculations will be based against that UTC offset. In other words, this particular SQL Azure database is offset 8 hours, and all of the other calculations then are related to that offset. And I've lost the mouse again. Okay. Can you see the mouse moving? I cannot see the mouse at all. So I'm just going to pretend I know what I'm doing here. This table is based on zip codes and time zones. This is a table I found out on the internet. I spent 2 or 3 hours. I finally found a table that had the information I need. I was able to download it. There are places where you can get it for free. I will relocate it and make that available as part of the presentation later. Each of the zip codes in the United States is based in a specific state. So zip code 00210 is in New Hampshire, and that state is in the time zone offset of -5. So that means that it is 5 hours offset from the Greenwich used to be called Greenwich Mean Time, but it's Universal Time something. So New Hampshire is offset 3 hours from where I am. In other words, I'm at -8, New Hampshire is at -5. They also observe daylight savings time, so that value is set at 1, which is equal to yes. I'm going to scroll down the list. See, I have Puerto Rico in here, Virgin Islands. I don't have Europe, and this is where I was making the comment earlier about making this work in other countries would require a much more extensive list. And this is, oh, gee. Yeah. I've completely lost my mouse. Although
are you able to alt-tab through things or no?
I'm not sure I
can.
Yeah.
I think you got too many things open.
That's probably the problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. You may want to just, if you can close the other things down, that would probably help.
Yeah, I'm going to close several other things and see if I can. Okay, okay, it's back temporarily. Okay. So as I was saying, if you go through here,
You're no longer presenting.
I'm no longer presenting. Well, I've got the mouse back. Okay, is it presenting again?
Looks like it's loading.
Okay, and again, I apologize. Every time it looks like every time I hop into it, then the mouse goes away and I lose the ability to show you what I wanted to show you. Okay. Are we back?
Yeah, go ahead and give it a try.
I can see it.
Okay, great. Yeah. All right. So this 98059, that's the zip code where I live, and as you can see, the time zone offset is 8 hours. If I run the data macro behind this command button, it will update the current local time against daylight savings time, which is in effect time zone offset, and UTC, which is the 0 hours. And you can see it will continually update itself. And it's running a data macro that does that calculation. Found another table which lists area codes. So we can do the same thing. Area code 307 is the state of Wyoming. The entire state is one single area code. They do observe daylight savings time. The time zone offset is -7. So there, the local time is 5:32. And if we do it here, the local time is 4:32 because it's offset by 8 hours. So that's basically how this whole thing works with the data macros. And I'm going to hop in here real quickly. Another thing that you're going to have to set up will be the start and end of daylight savings time in the future years. And I've only put in 5 years for demonstration purposes, but you would need to manually add that information. This is the list of all the zip codes in the United States. I put in some sample addresses. I think I'll kind of skip over that because I've wasted too much time here, but I put in some random addresses with the idea that you could see the local time. One of the interesting things, of course, is Arizona does not observe daylight savings time. So even though they're in a different time zone right now, at 4:33, because we don't go on, because they don't go on daylight savings time and we do, we're still actually at the same time locally. So that means when I call my sister in Arizona, depending on whether I call her in January or July, we're either the same time or offset by an hour. So that's how this thing works. And again, in your Access web app, you would end up with these basic tables: the zip code and time zone table, the area code and time zone table, the daylight savings time changes, and the data macros that drive it. So now let's see if we can, I'm going to close this rather than stress out my machine here. Come on. Yeah, man. So this is the design interface. Now, for those of you who do a lot of this will all be familiar. But for those of you who have not seen it before, the design interface here is similar to the traditional desktop in many ways, but it has a lot of differences that allow us to create the Access web apps. Tables, as you can see, are linked, and they are physically located somewhere in the cloud. In this case, as I said, my particular SQL Azure database server is located in the same time zone where I'm located. When we built the swimming pool staffing application for Art, he was physically in New York City or New York State, but his SQL Azure server was out here on the West Coast somewhere. So really quickly show you the records in it, and then we'll move on to the data macros. So every table in an Access web app must have a primary key, which is an auto number, whether you use it or not. So that's here. Area code, the state in which that area code is located, the country. And I did this in order to make it more flexible, but as I say, I've really only attempted to implement it so far for the United States. The time zone offset, which is the number of hours difference. The table that I found on the internet actually had sample cities within the area code, so I thought that was kind of handy. I don't know how I would use it in this application, but it's kind of nice to have it. Zip code, time zones, the same information. Pull this down off the internet. They include latitude and longitude, which I'm not needing. I don't need that, so I don't use it. But it has the same basic features: the zip code, the state where that zip code lives, the time zone offset for that state, whether they observe daylight savings, and the country. Now, when I was doing the research, I was told that there's one county in the state of Texas, which is in actually 2 different time zones. So I told Art, if he ever gets a client who has a swimming pool in that county, we're screwed. But other than that, I think it will work.
Do they have the same zip code?
I forget the details. I think they have a different zip code, and you could probably finesse it.
Right, because that's the reason for using the zip code for a location.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a while since I looked at it. I think you could finesse it that way.
And the other reason that they a lot of times include the longitude and latitude is so that you can do distance calculations.
Yes, and someday, Jack, when I get really ambitious, I'm going to call you, and you're going to help me do distance calculations in the sky, right?
It's simple. It's just a math formula.
Okay. No, I'm only partly kidding. I think I'll take a minute to do a little bit of editorializing here. One of the things I get really excited about is that even though these things are generally pretty simple compared to the power of VBA, you can do amazingly complex things with them. And it's rather frustrating that we don't have more emphasis on working with them, because as Jack says, once you know the math, you can figure out how to implement it. Okay, so here are my data macros, and I'll just, how much time do we have here? Because what's the schedule? We have about 20 more minutes. Lucy?
At least 20 more.
Yeah, we actually about 40 more. We go until 8. It's an hour and a half.
Oh, okay.
So it goes from 4 to 5:30.
Yeah, we're in good shape. And I'll just go through each of these macros then. This one is the one that determines whether daylight savings time is in effect at a given location. So we look in the table of changes. We look at what year we're in, and in this case, okay, you can open. There we go. So so we're looking at which year the calculation is in effect for. And we're looking to see whether today's date is greater than or equal to the scheduled start date for daylight savings time, and whether it's less than or equal to the end date. So if we were to look at this one for 2016, actually 2017, we're in 2017 already. We're prior to the start date for the change. Actually, now that I look at this, I forget whether I think this logic may not be right. You know, that'll. So we're saying today's date is greater than or equal to the start date. I'm getting the right calculation, so the macro is right. We're looking to see the year, which is 2017. So it's going to return false.
Because we're not in that period.
We're not in that period. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. So it's going to return then whether or not it's in effect. If it finds a value, it'll return it. If it doesn't, we won't have it. So if we find it, then we're going to say that daylight savings time is in effect. You know, I probably should have gone through this logic again, because although I spent quite a bit of time making it work out correctly, I'm not really.
So for right now, let's assume that it's all correct.
Yeah, it is correct. Yeah, because it's returning the daylight savings time is in effect for the location where I'm at. If it's not in effect, it returns the value of 0, and that's all this really does.
Because it's giving you a 1 if it's in effect and 0 if it's not, and then later on you're going to be either adding that 1 or subtracting the 1 or not, correct?
Correct, yeah. I guess what I'm looking at here, I got bogged down here looking at this logic, and rather than try to work through it, yeah, basically that's all we're doing. We're trying to see what year we're in and whether we're within the start and end dates. And that will give us yes, 1, true, if it is in effect, or 0, no, false, if it's not in effect. Okay. This one, all it does is go into the app table and get the time zone for the home base for this app. And as I showed you in the interface, basically the time zone that's in effect for the home base, or the location where this app is housed, is -8. That's 8 hours offset from the universal time zone. Okay, so we have two pieces of information. Are we in daylight savings time right now? What is the offset for the base location? The current local time uses a query, and I'll go show you the query in a second, where the postal code is equal to the zip code. So whatever zip code we pass into it, and that would be the 00112 or the 98059, whichever zip code we pass in is going to send back the current local time based on this query. So anytime we need to know what the local time is for any zip code, this query and this data macro will give us that information. Let's go look at that query. Local time by zip code. Okay. Here's where the heavy lifting happens. So, all right. So each address is tied to a specific postal code, and within the zip code time zone table, each zip code is related to a specific time zone and whether or not daylight savings time is in effect. Because table app only has one record in it, when we do the Cartesian join, it doesn't generate multiple records, but it does allow me to use that information in the calculation, which is right here. Okay. You ready? So the local time is computed as we're taking the time zone from this table. And again, this is going to be anywhere from 0 to minus 12, minus 8, I guess, in the United States. It could be more, but it's going to be anywhere from 0 to minus 8. We subtract 1 from that. Then we apply the app time zone, which is this one, and subtract it from that result. Now, the reason I did the -1 there is that in designing this, I discovered that in order to get the correct offset, I had to go back 1 from what was stored in this source table that I got. And rather than mess with all of these, these thousands of records, I decided to just do it manually in the query. So we're looking then at the daylight savings time. If it's in effect, if there is none, you return 0. Otherwise, we multiply it by the app daylight savings time in effect variable, and that tells us whether we need to add a value, a subtractive value for daylight savings time in effect, and we offset that against now. And what that does is generate local times for every address in our address table. So Utah is in the Mountain Time Zone. Local time out here on the West Coast is that's not right. Oh, that's, yeah, the local time, yes. Yeah, and this is the Utah, yeah. So local time is 4:50. This is the time in the app out here on the West Coast. This is the local time in Utah. Washington, you can see the local time and the app time are the same. And if we scroll down through here, all of the addresses for which I have set up a record are going to give me the correct app time and local time. And these are just some sample addresses I put in to have something to show in the demo. Arizona, because they do not observe daylight savings time, is actually showing app time and local time the same, because we're in the period of effective daylight savings time on the West Coast. Okay.
But we're not.
Oh, we're not. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, we're not, are we? That's what I was saying. I think this is wrong back here. And
yeah. But I get the idea.
Yeah, when I was looking at that, that did not look right, and I think at some point I must have changed something because. Anyway, yeah. Rather than get bogged down, I'll fix that and make sure it's ready before I post it back for you to look at, because somewhere along there that got changed. But we're right now. Oh, that's right. That's right. I'm sorry. We're on daylight savings time for Washington, which means that we're in the same time zone now, or excuse me, the same time now as Arizona, because they do not go on daylight savings time. Okay. This one returns the local time for all zips in my zip code table. It functions the same as this one, except it's going to run against all zips and not just the ones in my address table. And it should generate the same kind of information, except that it is going to show you by state the app time, the local time, and the zip code within that state. So if we want to know the local time in any zip code throughout the United States, this query will give it to us. And it's using the same calculation here. We're adding time zone -1, and that time zone is the offset from UTC. We're also subtracting then the app time zone, which is the -8, plus if daylight savings time is in effect or not, it's going to include a second offset for that hour, and in the result, and in doing so, it's going to give us the local time as of right now for each zip code in the United States. And as you can see, every time we run it, it's going to recalculate that time. Okay. And this one basically does the same thing, except it's based on area code instead of zip or postal code. And it's going to return the local time based on whatever area code we pass in. And that's this query, and again, there's calculation, and that's the same calculation for local time. This one, I threw this in as sort of an additional piece of information, but I figured this is a demo and somebody might want to look at that. But basically it's saying the difference between app time, which is 4:55 on the West Coast, and area code 201 is 3 hours. And that's an additional confirmation that we're seeing the correct offsets. So that's really all it does. In order to incorporate this into any application where you wanted to allow users to do some sort of time-sensitive login, logout activity across a wide area, across multiple time zones, you can drop in the tables that are required, the macros, and these queries, and then just run them behind the scenes to get your offsets. And as I mentioned a couple of times, in order to make this work beyond the confines of the United States, you'd have to expand both the area code and possibly the zip code, postal code tables to include those other locations. And that's pretty much it. The only other thing you would have to do is make sure that before someone used it, they would have to have a way to identify either the area code that's appropriate to where they're signing in from, or the zip code. In other words, if you're working at a swimming pool in New York State, you would put in the appropriate zip code for the address of that swimming pool. If you're logging in from a swimming pool in Missouri, you would then have to identify the zip code for the address of that swimming pool in Missouri. Even though most phones these days, most smartphones do have the ability, GPS, to tell you exactly where you are. Getting that information in here would be another layer of complexity. And maybe we'll work on that next as well. But first, and actually, as soon as I hang up here, I'm going to go back and see, because I have a feeling that these are not quite right, and they look right here, but for some reason they just seem odd. Okay, that's it. Any questions, any comments, any suggestions?
That was really good.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I will go through that and confirm that daylight savings time thing is correct, and then republish it. It is available now on my website as a download. Okay, some questions that are in the question, yeah. Let me go. Julian commented, to make this international, you would need to have the daylight savings time dates per country. I think that's true. I don't know if, this is my provincialism. I assume that most countries are going to be in a single time zone, but there are places like China, Russia, which are also spanning multiple time zones. So I think you'd have to put a lot of work into figuring out some way to identify locations by postal code or some equivalent to figure out where they are exactly in which time zone. The only way I know of to get the current time zone from your app server is to just write a query and put now and see what it gives you. In other words, we'll just do it this way real quick. And that tells me it's 5 o'clock wherever my server is. And again, since it's already 5 o'clock here on the Pacific time zone, that I know then my server is out here in the Pacific time zone. Yeah. Now there is another comment here from Judy. If you know if you know for sure that all of your users are going to be within a certain geographic location and you don't have to worry about multiple locations, the calculation is obviously a lot simpler. You just do the time zone offset. I say I'm UTC -8 here. All of my users are going to be in UTC -7. So I just do everything with an offset of 1. And that would work fine as long as you know that nobody's going to be traveling outside of that physical location, that geographic area. But to make it flexible enough to work across the country, I decided to get a little more advanced with it. Okay. Anything else? Anybody want to see the app again or something?
Maybe people might have questions or want to talk about something else.
Yeah, if there are no more questions here, let's throw it open for other issues.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Tamita. So when, if you wanted to use this app but not right now, how might it be available?
I have it available as a download on my website. So let me see if I can. Yeah, I'm now gun shy about changing things up. So without because I've had so much. But let's go back to the PowerPoint. I got to restart it now. No, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it a little differently because we'll get there faster if we do this. Theoretically, we'll get there faster if we do it this way. And present. Okay. Now, so this is the website address, and I'm going to put this. Okay. So I put the address into the conversation. You should be able to copy it out of there. And it is this third one down. And if I copy the shortcut, okay. That's the original. And actually, I think that version that's out there now is probably correct. Whatever problem crept into my demo since then, I'm sure this was working correctly when I posted it. So if you go get it right now, you probably will get the correct version. And I will compare the two and make sure that whichever one is up there is the correct one. But you can get it there from now. You will have to unzip it out of the zip file and deploy it to your own Office 365 site. I did not go through the hassle of making it available on the Microsoft App Store. I decided that was, as my mother used to say, that's too much sugar for a cent.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, you can get it there. You can also get some others. This one, the diabetes tracker, is one that I built for myself. It's a much more elaborate system, and I have some others. As always, I appreciate feedback. If things don't work correctly, let me know and I can fix them up. Okay. So on that note, unless there are other specific questions, I'll kind of wrap it up. I learned a couple of things here about presenting, which I will work on for future presentations. And okay, I guess that's it.
All right, sounds great. All right, thanks a lot, George. I appreciate it.